Confidence is not what you think it is. It's not always knowing that things are going to go right. Actually, confidence is the belief that no matter what happens, you're going to be okay. You're going to be okay if things fall apart. You're going to be okay if you fail. You're going to be okay if things don't go as planned. So how do you get to this level of confidence? How do you get to the point where you know that no matter what happens, no matter what situation you're in, no matter if things fall apart, no matter if you lose, you're going to be okay? How do you get to that point? Well, first, in order to get to that point, you need to understand how your brain works. So according to behavioral economics, and there's been a lot of research on this, as human beings, we fear loss way more than we actually want winning. It feels a lot worse to lose $100 than it does to gain $100. So in psychology, what they call that is loss aversion. And in our heads, what we do is we usually inflate the potential loss or consequences by 2 to 7 times. So whenever we're thinking about doing something, we inflate the potential consequences way more than what reality shows. So how do you actually overcome that? Well, you start by making small tests. You start by trying little things that involve a small amount of risk. In order to build confidence, you always have to exercise commitment and courage. So you do that in small ways first, small tests. Maybe ask that girl on a date or try something small and realize that you can handle it, you can recover. Kevin Kelly, the famous writer, said that pros are really just amateurs who know how to gracefully recover from their mistakes. That's the key, is knowing that whatever the situation is going to bring, you're going to be able to recover. There's another concept that's connected with confidence. It's called identity capital. And identity capital is the idea that you have ownership over your past. If you've watched yourself overcome bad situations or overcome obstacles or challenges, you can use that capital. You have ownership over that. If you've watched yourself do something hard, this is why for most people, most millionaires are first generation rich, is because they come from a bad situation and they were able to grow out of that. They were able to watch themselves do hard things. They were able to realize that in bad situations, they could still get out of it. So one of the ways to build confidence is by making small bets in yourself, by actually trying something that involves some form of risk. And that's actually really the psychological definition of courage, is pursuing a worthwhile goal that involves some form of risk. It's something you do intentionally. You're intentionally pursuing a goal that involves some form of risk. And Dan Sullivan, the founder of Strategic Coach, the #1 entrepreneurial coach in the world, said that there really are 4 C's to confidence. The first one is commitment, meaning that you commit to some outcome, and following that commitment comes courage. You take that risk. You try that thing. You're willing to face the downside. And then through taking that risk, through exercising that courage, you build capability. You build capabilities of learning new skills, learning how to handle uncertainty, and ultimately that's what builds confidence. In professional sports, for example, basketball, those with the most confidence are the ones who are willing to take the final shot. They're the ones who are willing to lose, and they're willing to take the consequences of losing. They're willing to take that final shot and miss. Most people, they don't want that final shot because if they miss, they don't want to have to deal with the repercussions. Whereas those with extreme confidence, they're willing to take the repercussions of failure because they realize in reality that the repercussions aren't that big. If you miss that shot, yes, you might have lost the game. Yes, you may have even lost the championship, but there's always another opportunity and you can always learn from that. And people who miss that last shot, they don't use that as the basis for taking the next shot. They're still willing to take the next one and the next one and the next one. And for them, it's actually more risky to not take the shot, to have always wondered what if. So that's the first key, is realizing that the costs or the consequences are a lot smaller than you imagine them to be. It's fears that you're projecting. It's extreme fears that you're projecting onto situations. I remember, for example, when I first started blogging online, I was worried about what people thought of me. I was terrified of throwing my opinions out on the internet because what would people from high school think of me, or what would this person or that person think on my Facebook feed? I realized in throwing it out there that no one even really cared, and that I can't control other people's opinions, and honestly, other people's opinions shouldn't matter to me. Other people's opinions are none of my business. And so you gain a lot of confidence when you realize that first off, the consequences aren't gonna be as big as you think they are, probably not as big as you think they are, but second off, on the other side, you can learn a lot through failures. And that's actually, again, what Kevin Kelly said, is pros are amateurs who learn how to gracefully respond to their failures. That's actually another one of the keys to building confidence, is getting into difficult situations, making mistakes, but then learning to recover from them quickly. When you make a mistake, rather than avoiding it or being sad or upset, and that's often the reaction is to withdraw, to escape, to run away. But if you can just fully face the situation, and frame it in a positive way. Rather than saying, why is this happening to me? If you framed it as, this is happening for me. This is exactly what I need. I'm the one who's attracting the situation into my life. You've attracted the situation, you've created the situation. So if you can immediately take full ownership for it and frame the situation as, this is exactly what I need, this is exactly what's gonna give me the skills, the tools to move forward, then you can quickly recover from your mistakes. And if you watch yourself recover from mistakes and get yourself out of bad situations, then you'll realize you can get out of worse and worse situations, which will give you the confidence to take on bigger and bigger risks, or to try things that may be terrifying to you but aren't that big a deal. Now, all of this actually embodies a really cool concept in psychology. It's called psychological flexibility. There's a growing body of research on this concept of psychological flexibility. And really what it is it's the ability to handle uncertainty. It's the ability to be flexible to your emotions when you're stepping into a situation of uncertainty, when you're trying something new, when you're trying something that might not work. And that's, again, really what courage is it's the willingness to try something that might not work. When you're out of your comfort zone, when you're trying something new, you can become flexible to your emotions. Rather than being defined by your emotions, rather than being driven by your emotions, you can learn to frame them in a positive way. You can use stress as a positive, but ultimately you can become flexible to being outside your comfort zone. And when you're flexible outside your comfort zone and you learn how to regulate your emotions, meaning when you're stressed, you learn how to quickly handle them. You pull out your journal, you write down what's going on, you get it on paper so that you can see it more objectively. You get help from people, you ask people help, you get other people's opinions, and ultimately, you quickly make informed actions. There's actually a quote from Tom Bilyeu that I love. He said, it's better to go 1,000 miles an hour in the wrong direction than not moving at all. Because if you're going 1,000 miles an hour in the wrong direction, at least you're getting really fast feedback. And with fast feedback, you can actually recover, you can adjust, you can go forward. It's that whole idea of massive action with constant correction. Airplanes, for example, are always getting pushed off course. Most airplanes on a flight across the country, they're nudged off course constantly. I think that it says that airplanes are off course like 90% of the time, but they have that inertial guidance system that's constantly course correcting them. The problem is even if you're off course by 1 degree, but you don't correct course for like a year or a decade, then it gets unfathomable to try to correct it. But if you're off course, but you're constantly correcting through your own intuition, through journaling, through clarifying your vision, through connecting with your future self, through getting increasingly high quality help from mentors, friends, and people, then it doesn't matter how many mistakes you make. What matters is moving on from those mistakes. Another powerful way to build confidence is, first off, as I've already talked about, knowing that the consequences for failure are probably not as bad as you think they are. But a second layer to that, which is even higher, is the belief and the knowledge that even if you lost it all, you would be completely fine. So Trevor Lawrence is the quarterback for the Clemson football team. Clemson University is the #1 football program in the world. And by the way, I got my PhD there. But Trevor Lawrence is an amazing quarterback. And he was interviewed once about what he thought of all the fame, because he's getting all this fame. He's probably going to be the Heisman Trophy winner this year. He's probably going to be the #1 draft pick in the NFL in the upcoming season. And he talked about his Christianity. He talked about his beliefs in Christ and about how, at the end of the day, his identity is not built on himself as a football player. So he doesn't really care about the opinions of other people. Even if he lost everything, if he broke his leg or something like that and had to quit football forever, his identity is built in his religious beliefs or in his faith in God or his faith in Christ. And so that gives him rock solid confidence that it doesn't really matter what people say about him, and his identity is not built on the one thing about himself which everyone admires. And that allows you to have a lot of confidence in any situation as well, is when your identity is not so built on what you're doing or on your situation. A lot of people, they put their identity into their career or into their finances, and when those things get lost, they have no identity left. There's a lot of reports of people, for example, who are billionaires who, when the market crashes and they lose their billions, they then commit suicide because their whole identity was that of being a billionaire. So beyond knowing about loss aversion, if you have a belief system, specifically in a higher power, for example, that allows your identity to be built on something so much bigger, then it really doesn't matter what happens in this life or what you have or don't have. Your identity is built on something so much more profound than your current circumstances or your current outcomes. Now, the final aspect of extreme confidence is extreme preparation. This is something that you learn from elite athletes, but also just people in general, people who are smart with their finances. Take COVID-19, for example. Those who were prepared financially in their career, they handled this situation a lot better. Jim Rohn, the famous writer and the famous author, said that you can't really avoid the winters of life. There are always going to be seasons. There's going to be winter, spring, summer, fall, and after the fall, which is where all the reaping happens, by the way, that's when the farmer reaps. It's during the fall. It's during the spring that you plant, the summer that you work, and it's during the fall that you're actually like reaping all of your rewards as a as a farmer. But what always comes after all of the reaping? When the market's the highest, usually that's when there's some form of correction or failure. And those who are at their peak, there's another really good book I would recommend to you. It's called Peaks and Valleys. But basically what the author says is that for people who are on their peaks, bad things happen because of the foolish choices they make on their peaks. When things are going really well, usually people get complacent. They don't plan for the future. They overspend. But when you actually are smart during your peak, you prepare for the next winter because you know the winter's coming. You put money away. You actually build yourself up in multiple ways. You have good resources. Then with massive preparation, you don't need to fear. When you're fully prepared, and this is something that even LeBron James has said all the time. He's been asked many, many times, how do you deal with the stress of various situations? And he just says, I know that I've prepared more than anyone else. And so when the situation gets intense, I know I've got more to draw from. But on a more practical level, what would happen if when things crash or when things fall apart, what would happen if you had like $10,000 or $20,000 cash at home on hand because you had prepared for it? What would happen if over the last 10 years you'd been building up your security blanket, and you also had lots of resources and lots of friends and people who could help you if things fell apart? Security is a really important thing, and when you're really secure and safe, then you have the ability to take risks. That's actually what a lot of basketball players say. They say that when you have the security of knowing that your team's got your back, then you're willing to take risks. And you can say, and that's true as well in normal relationships with family. If you have a sense of security and safety and protection, then you can be courageous to take those risks because you've got that safety net, you've got that protection. And so you can be increasingly confident and courageous and take on bigger and bigger opportunities or handle bigger situations when you've been preparing. And you should prepare always be preparing for winters and for unexpected challenges. If you're always preparing and increasing your preparedness, then you can take bigger and bigger risks, or you can handle bigger challenges. And you can know that even if things fall apart, you've got safety nets in powerful relationships, you've got knowledge, you've got capabilities. So that's how you build confidence. Confidence is the awareness that the situation isn't as bad as you think it's going to be, that whatever happens, you're going to be okay. It's also not placing your identity in yourself, in your circumstances, or in your outcomes. The final way to build increasing confidence in any situation is increasingly preparing yourself for when things inevitably will go wrong. Of this, Randy Pausch, the author of the book The Last Lecture, said this. He said, one thing that makes it possible to be an optimist is if you have a contingency plan for when all hell breaks loose. There are a lot of things I don't worry about because I have a plan in place if they do. That's the key, is that no matter where you're at right now, if you're on a peak or if you're in a valley, if you're in a spring, summer, fall, or if you're in the winter, prepare for the next one. Increasingly prepare yourself. As they say, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. If you had planted that tree 20 years ago, you wouldn't have probably had a lot of the problems you have right now. But you can handle that by learning and by investing right now, investing in your future self, putting plans in place, building strongholds around yourself, preparing yourself for when things will go wrong, and so that when they start falling apart, you can handle it. You don't have to be stressed. Actually, the final thought on this is that there's a lot of research that shows that the people, for example, college students, who are most prepared for tests, it's actually during the testing period that they're the least stressed. At the end of the semester during finals, that's usually when most students are binge drinking caffeine, binge eating sugar, being up all night, because they're so stressed because they hadn't prepared for the final. But the students who had actually prepared all semester, it's actually at the end of the semester, the testing period, that's the least stressful part because they were ready for it. It's actually the most enjoyable part because that's when they could put their knowledge to the test. And so when things fall apart, when things get difficult, you can have extreme confidence and take extreme courage, take bigger risks when everyone's bailing. We all know that when things are falling apart, that's when the greatest opportunities are for growth. And if you're prepared, if you've been smart, and if you've been preparing for it, then when things start to crumble and crash, you've got the biggest opportunities to take the biggest risks and take the biggest leaps because now you're prepared for it, mentally, psychologically, and situationally. That's how you build confidence. I'm Dr. Benjamin Hardy. Please subscribe to this channel. Also, please sign up for my free 30-day Future Self program. It will blow your mind. The link is right down in the description. You can get 30 days of free emails where I'll teach you all the science of becoming your future self. Talk to you later.